The secret passage smelled like rot and old fear. Sera Ashford pressed her small frame against the cold stone wall, 14 years old and invisible as always, watching through the crack in the panels as her father dragged the unconscious woman across the floor of his private study. She should not have been there. The youngest daughter of Alpha Ashford had no business creeping through the walls of the family estate, spying on matters that did not concern her. But invisibility had its advantages. When no one remembered you existed, no one thought to look for you in the shadows. The woman's head lolled against her chest, dark hair matted with blood. Sera's photographic memory captured every detail with cruel precision. The way the woman's fingers twitched, the sound her body made when it hit the floor, the expression on her father's face, cold and satisfied as he knelt beside her. Alpha Ashford's hands found the woman's throat, not to strangle, to position. His fingers tested the angle of her neck with the careful attention of a craftsman examining his tools. Then he twisted, sharp, clean. The crack echoed through the study like a branch breaking in winter. Sera's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her hand over her mouth, willing herself to silence, to stillness, to the invisibility that had always been her curse and now might be her only salvation. Her father stood, brushing dust from his knees. His beta, Garrett Stone, emerged from the far door, younger then, barely 25, his face carved from the same brutal efficiency as his alpha's. "We arrange her at the base of the stairs." Marcus's voice carried the flat tone of a man discussing livestock. "Make it look like she fell, broke her neck on impact." "And the investigation?" Her father's question held no concern, only calculation. "Drake will demand one, but without evidence of foul play, what can he prove? She was traveling alone. Accidents happen." The woman had a name. Sera learned it later, piecing together whispered conversations, stolen documents, fragments of truth that her perfect memory assembled like a puzzle made of broken glass. Eliza Thorne, promised mate to Rowan Drake, the Eastern Alpha. A political alliance that would have surrounded the Ashford territories, squeezed them between two powerful packs, reduced her father's influence to nothing. So he had killed her, made it look like tragedy, started a blood feud that would simmer for 8 years, waiting for someone to pay the price her father owed. Sera had stayed silent. 14 and terrified, she had crept back through the passages to her room, climbed into bed, and said nothing. Not to her mother, not to her 5 older siblings, not to anyone. She remembered everything. The crack of bones, the smell of blood, the casual way her father had committed murder. Her photographic memory turned it into a permanent record, playing back in perfect detail whenever she closed her eyes. That was 8 years ago. Now, at 22, Sera sat in the same study where she had watched her father kill, listening to him announce that he was sending her away to die. The marriage arrangement came without warning. One moment she was serving dinner to her siblings, invisible as always, forgotten in the chaos of their debates about trade routes and territorial disputes. The next, her father's voice cut through the noise like the crack of a neck breaking. "Sera, you will marry Garrett Stone of Iron Peak. The ceremony is in 2 weeks." 5 sets of eyes turned toward her. Her siblings stared as if seeing her for the first time, their expressions cycling through shock, pity, and relief that it was not them being sent to the Mountain Alpha, whose reputation for brutality was matched only by the rumors about what had happened to his last mate. Her oldest brother, Thomas, found his voice first. "Garrett Stone, the unyielding? Father, she is barely past her 20th year, and he is exactly what we need." Her father's tone allowed no argument. "The alliance is arranged. The matter is settled." Sera said nothing. She had learned long ago that speaking only reminded people she existed, and being noticed by her father was never safe. But that night, she picked the lock on his private safe. 8 years of watching, of being invisible, had taught her every security measure in the estate. Her fingers worked the mechanism with practiced ease, and the heavy door swung open to reveal stacks of correspondence, land deeds, and at the bottom, a leather folder marked with Drake's seal. She pulled it free, settled cross-legged on the floor, and began to read. The documents laid it out in careful detail. The murder that was not a murder. Eliza Thorne had not died from a fall. Her father had sold her to Northern Alliance operatives, alive and unconscious, for territory concessions and gold. The staged accident, the fake burial, Drake's 8-year search for a body that had never existed, the political maneuvering required to keep the truth buried, and finally, the solution. Sera Ashford, youngest daughter, unmissed and expendable, would be married to Garrett Stone. If she died in the claiming, as Lyanna Frost had died before her, it would be tragic but convenient. Her father's secrets would die with her, buried in the mountain stronghold where no one could question what had happened. If she survived, she would be useful leverage, a hostage to ensure Garrett's cooperation, a bridge between territories that kept Drake's attention divided. Either way, she was being eliminated. Sera sat in the darkness of her father's study, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, and made a choice. She could refuse the marriage and watch her father kill her mother to ensure her silence. She could run and be hunted down before she made it past the border. Or she could go to Iron Peak, survive whatever Garrett Stone was, and use her new position to destroy the man who had made her a witness to murder. She chose survival. She chose patience. She chose revenge as a long game, played from inside the enemy's stronghold with a mate who might kill her, but at least would not bore her to death with his cowardice. 2 weeks gave her time to prepare. She researched Garrett Stone with the same methodical attention she applied to everything. Battle of Shadow Ridge, where he had held a defensive position against 40 rogues for 3 days straight, killing them one by one until reinforcements arrived. The Northern Campaign, where his tactical brilliance had turned a losing war into a negotiated peace. The death of Lyanna Frost, his first mate, 10 years prior in what was officially called a claiming accident, but whispered about as something darker. Sera broke into the pack archives and found Lyanna's file. 5'1", 19 years old, daughter of Vera Cross, given in political marriage to secure an alliance, dead within 3 months of the ceremony. Cause of death, catastrophic spinal fracture during mating bond formation. The similarities were too precise to be coincidence. Her father was sending another small, young, politically convenient daughter to the Alpha who had killed the last one. The pattern was intentional, the outcome expected. Sera packed her belongings in a single bag. She had never owned much, never been given much, never been important enough to warrant attention or resources. The invisibility that had been her curse would now be her camouflage. No one would think the overlooked daughter capable of strategy, of patience, of the cold calculation required to survive what was coming. The night before the wedding, she visited Eliza Thorne's unmarked grave. It was not in the family cemetery, of course. Her father had buried the murdered woman in the woods beyond the estate, a shallow hole marked only by a cairn of stones that Sera had built herself years ago, a small rebellion against silence. She knelt in the dirt, pulling up a handful of earth, letting it sift through her fingers. I was 14 and terrified. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I stayed silent because I did not know what else to do. I am sorry for that. I am sorry I did not save you. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and approaching rain. But I am going to make this right. She closed her fist around the dirt, feeling it press into her palm. I am going to survive him, and then I am going to destroy the man who put us both in graves. She tucked the earth into a small leather pouch, tied it around her neck beneath her shirt. A reminder, a promise, a piece of Eliza to carry forward into whatever came next. The wedding day arrived with cold precision. Garrett Stone and his 12-man honor guard rode through the gates of the Ashford estate in full tactical formation, treating the ceremony like an insertion into hostile territory, which Sera supposed it was. She watched from her window as they dismounted. Garrett was exactly as the reports had described, 6.5 feet of muscle and controlled violence, his face marked by a scar that ran from temple to jaw, a souvenir from the Northern Campaign. He wore black ceremonial leathers, and woven into the shoulder guard was a braid of dark hair, preserved with some kind of resin that made it shine in the afternoon light. Lyanna's hair. He carried his dead mate into every battle, every negotiation, every moment of his life. The grief or the guilt or both, worn like armor that never came off. Sera's oldest sister helped her dress, her hands shaking as she laced the white gown. "You do not have to do this." Sera's voice cracked. "We could hide you, help you run." "And then what?" Sera met her sister's eyes in the mirror. "Father kills mother to punish the family, hunts me down within a week, kills me slowly to make a point. This way, at least I have a chance. He killed his last mate. Maybe." Sera's tone was flat. "Or maybe she died and he has been blamed for it ever since. Either way, I have seen worse than Garrett Stone. Her sister's hands stilled on the laces. What have you seen? Everything. Sera's photographic memory flickered through 8 years of observations, stolen documents, witnessed crimes. I have seen everything, and I have remembered all of it. The ceremony took place in the great hall, filled with wolves from both packs, the air thick with tension and barely concealed hostility. Sera walked down the aisle alone. Her father did not offer his arm, did not give her away, simply watched with cold satisfaction as she approached the mountain alpha who was supposed to be her ending. Garrett Stone turned as she reached the platform. His gray eyes swept over her, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition or horror or both. He went very still, his hands clenching at his sides, and for 3 full seconds he just stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. The officiant began the traditional words. The ceremony required responses, vows spoken aloud, promises made before witnesses. When it came time for Garrett to answer, he hesitated. The silence stretched. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Sera watched his face, cataloging every tell. The tension in his jaw, the way his fingers twitched toward the braid on his shoulder, the barely perceptible shake in his hands. He was terrified, not disgusted, not reluctant, terrified. "Do you accept this bond?" The officiant's voice carried an edge of concern. Garrett's throat worked. His eyes locked on Sera's, and she saw the war being fought behind them. Fear against duty. Past against present. The memory of Liana against the reality of Sera standing before him in white silk, small and young, and so similar to the mate he had buried that it must have felt like the universe was punishing him for crimes he could not escape. "I do." His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper, "and I will do better this time." The crowd murmured. The words were not traditional, not proper, but they were honest. And honesty, Sera was learning, might be the only thing that could keep her alive. The ceremony required a kiss to seal the bond. Garrett stepped forward, towering over her, his presence overwhelming in a way that should have been frightening, but instead felt like standing at the base of a mountain and deciding whether to climb. He did not kiss her mouth. His hand came up to cup her face with surprising gentleness, and he pressed his lips to her forehead, a chaste touch that somehow felt more intimate than passion would have been, like he was blessing her, or apologizing, or both. When he pulled back, his hand lingered for a moment against her cheek. "You should have run." His voice was too low for anyone else to hear, just for her. A warning or a confession or a plea. Sera met his eyes without flinching. "I have seen worse than you." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or the first flicker of respect. "What have you seen?" The same question her sister had asked, but coming from him it felt different, like he actually wanted to know the answer. "Things I cannot unsee." She kept her voice equally quiet. "But that is for another time, if we survive each other long enough to have one." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then we should probably try to survive." The wedding feast blurred past in a haze of forced celebration and political posturing. Sera ate nothing, trusting nothing prepared in her father's kitchens. Garrett stayed close, his presence a wall between her and the rest of the room, and she noticed that he too refused food and drink, his warrior's paranoia matching her own survival instincts. They left at dusk, the honor guard forming a protective box around them as they rode north toward Iron Peak. 3 days' journey through territory that grew increasingly hostile the farther they traveled from civilization. The first night, they stopped at a way station, a small cabin maintained for travelers. 1 room, 1 bed. Sera's heart rate kicked up as Garrett closed and barred the door, but he made no move toward her. Instead, he positioned himself between her and the entrance, his back to the wall, his eyes on the shadows beyond the window. "You should sleep." His voice was tired. "The journey tomorrow will be harder." "Where will you sleep?" "I will not." "For 3 nights?" "I have gone longer." He did not look at her. "Sleep, Sera. You are safe tonight." She believed him, which was strange, because she had not believed anyone in 8 years. But something about the way he held himself, the careful distance he maintained, the exhaustion in his voice that spoke of a man fighting himself as much as external threats, all of it suggested that whatever Garrett Stone was, he was not a liar. She lay down on the narrow bed, fully clothed, and watched him watch the darkness. His profile was sharp in the moonlight, all hard angles and old scars. He did not move except to breathe, did not sleep, did not let his guard drop for even a moment. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" Her question broke the silence somewhere past midnight. "Alliance." His answer was immediate. "Your father controls the southern passes. I need them secured." "That is why you need the marriage. Why did you agree to it?" Long pause. "Because turning it down would have been seen as weakness, and I cannot afford to look weak. Even if it means taking another mate you might kill?" His hands clenched. "I did not kill Liana." "The official report says you did." "The official report is a lie to protect people who would rather blame me than face the truth." He finally turned to look at her. She was poisoned. Bone-rot curse. I watched her deteriorate for weeks, and when she begged me to end it, when the pain became too much, I did. Quickly, cleanly. I crushed her spine because it was kinder than letting her suffer. Sera processed this, her memory pulling up details from the archived reports. The timeline matched. The symptoms described in the medical notes fit bone-rot poisoning, and Garrett's voice carried the weight of truth, or at least his version of it. "Why not use the antidote?" "Because using it would have revealed that I knew about the conspiracy." His jaw tightened. Political enemies had poisoned her to destabilize my pack. Using the antidote meant revealing my hand, triggering a civil war we were not prepared to win. So I made the Alpha's choice. I sacrificed her to save hundreds. Sera sat up, hugging her knees to her chest. "That is utilitarian murder." "Yes. No denial, no justification, just acknowledgement. That is what Alphas do. We calculate value, we sacrifice one for many. We carry the guilt so the pack can survive. And if you have to make that choice again, I will." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "And it will destroy me again, but I will still make it." Honesty. Brutal, terrible honesty. Sera found herself respecting it in a way she had never respected her father's lies. "At least you do not pretend to be better than you are." "Would it help if I did?" "No." She lay back down, her eyes on the ceiling. "I can work with honesty, even terrible honesty. What I cannot work with is deception." "Then we understand each other." The second night brought different challenges. Garrett's beta and senior warriors joined them for a tactical discussion that lasted until dawn. Sera sat in the corner, forgotten as usual, but this time she listened with purpose. They spoke of border defenses, rogue movements, supply lines, and political tensions with neighboring packs. The conversation revealed pack dynamics she had not understood from documents alone. The warriors deferred to Garrett absolutely, but they challenged Marcus with the casual disrespect of men who sensed weakness in leadership. She watched Marcus navigate it, saw the tension in his shoulders when they questioned his tactical calls, noticed the way his jaw tightened when Garrett overruled him without explanation. Marcus Stone, Garrett's half-brother and beta, was the one who finally acknowledged her presence. He was younger than Garrett by 5 years, his features similar but softer, lacking the brutal edges that war and guilt had carved into his brother's face. Same gray eyes, but where Garrett's held the weight of command and old sorrows, Marcus's held something harder to define, ambition maybe, or resentment carefully controlled. "What do you think, Lady Ashford?" His tone held genuine curiosity, but Sera caught the challenge underneath, testing whether she was decoration or had substance. "About the eastern route we are debating." Everyone turned to stare. Sera was accustomed to being invisible, not consulted. But she had been listening, and her photographic memory had already mapped the terrain they were discussing against maps she had studied before leaving home. "You are arguing about whether to take the canyon pass or the ridge route." She kept her voice level. "The canyon is faster but leaves you exposed to ambush from high ground. The ridge is slower but gives you tactical advantage if attacked. You are assuming those are your only options." "They are." "No." She stood, moving to the map they had spread on the table. "There is a third option. Here." Her finger traced a path. Game trail. Too narrow for a full force, but perfect for a small party. Cuts travel time by half and keeps you off the main routes entirely. The warriors exchanged glances. Marcus leaned forward, studying the route she had indicated. "How do you know about this trail?" I read. She met his eyes without backing down. "Everything. Maps, scout reports, terrain surveys. When you are invisible, you have time to pay attention to details others miss." Garrett was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Approval, maybe, or surprise, or the beginning of something that might have been respect. "We use her route." His decision was final. Split the party. Half takes the canyon as diversion, draws attention. Half takes the game trail with Sera and me. We reunite at the northern ford. Marcus nodded slowly, still studying Sera like he was reassessing his initial evaluation. You think tactically. Where did you learn that? I watched my brothers train, studied their strategies. No one thought to stop me because no one remembered I was there. Being overlooked makes you observant. Garrett's voice held recognition. I know what that is like. Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them. Understanding. Connection. The first thread of a bond that had nothing to do with ceremony or duty, and everything to do with two people who had learned to survive by staying invisible until the moment they chose to strike. The third night brought violence. They were half a day from Iron Peak when the attack came. 3 rogues testing the defenses, probing for weakness. They hit fast and brutal, targeting the rear guard, trying to separate Sera from the main party. Garrett moved like controlled chaos. He shifted mid-stride, bones reshaping with sounds like branches breaking, fur erupting through skin as he transformed into something massive and silver gray. The wolf that emerged stood nearly 5 feet at the shoulder, scarred and battle-worn, his eyes burning with tactical intelligence that most wolves lost when they gave themselves over to instinct. He killed the first rogue in 3 seconds, crushed its throat with jaws that could snap bone like kindling. The second tried to flee and died with its spine severed. The third made it 10 feet before Garrett ran it down and tore out its heart. The entire fight lasted less than a minute. Sera watched from where one of the warriors had shielded her, her heart hammering against her ribs, not from fear, from fascination. This was what real power looked like, not her father's cowardice hiding behind political games, not her brother's strutting and posturing. This was strength that did not need to announce itself because everyone could see it, feel it, understand that challenging it meant death. Garrett shifted back to human form, standing among the bodies, blood coating his hands and chest. His eyes found hers across the clearing, and she saw him assess her reaction, waiting for fear, for revulsion, for the response that Liana must have had, the civilian horror at necessary violence. Sera walked toward him, ignoring the beta's protest. She stopped in front of Garrett, close enough to see the blood still dripping from his fingers, close enough to smell the copper and wild things that clung to him after a kill. You took a hit! She pointed to the slash across his ribs, already healing but still bleeding. Sit. Let me bandage it. I will heal. Sit anyway. He sat, and Sera knelt beside him, pulling medical supplies from her pack, her hands steady as she cleaned the wound. The warriors watched in silence, and she knew they were judging her, assessing whether she had the spine to be Luna or whether she would break like crystal under pressure. Garrett watched her too, his gray eyes tracking every movement of her hands. You did not scream. Why would I scream? Most civilian wolves panic when they see combat. I am not most wolves. She met his gaze while wrapping the bandage, and that was not combat. That was execution. Quick, efficient, necessary. You identified threats and eliminated them before they could harm the pack. That is what alphas do. Something shifted in his expression. Where did you learn to differentiate combat from execution? I watch. I remember. I understand violence better than you might think. She finished the bandage, her fingers lingering for a moment against his skin. You are not the monster you think you are, Garrett Stone. Monsters do not try to protect people, they just destroy. His hand came up to catch hers, his grip gentle despite the strength in it. What have you seen, Sera? What made you like this? I saw my father murder a woman named Eliza Thorne when I was 14 years old. The words came out flat, factual. I watched him break her neck and bury her in the woods. I have carried that memory every day since. Perfect recall, every detail, every sound. I cannot unsee it, cannot unhear it, cannot stop knowing what he is. Garrett went very still. Eliza Thorne, Drake's intended mate. Yes, she disappeared 8 years ago. She did not disappear. My father killed her to prevent an alliance that would have weakened his position. He has been covering it up ever since. And you have stayed silent. I was 14, alone, terrified. She pulled her hand free. But I am 22 now, and I am done being silent. Garrett stood slowly, pulling her up with him. His eyes held something new. Not pity, not sympathy. Understanding. We are both carrying bodies then. His voice was quiet. Yours in memory, mine in action. Does that make us monsters or survivors? Maybe both. He was still holding her hand. Maybe that is what it takes to live in this world. being monster enough to survive and human enough to hate yourself for it. The bond between them had been a political arrangement, a ceremony performed for witnesses. But standing in the clearing with blood on the ground and truth between them, Sera felt something shift, a recognition, a partnership, the beginning of something that might be more than survival if they could both live long enough to figure out what. "We should keep moving." Marcus's voice broke the moment. "Iron Peak is still hours away, and we are exposed here." Garrett nodded, but his eyes stayed on Sera for another beat. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not being afraid of what I am." They rode hard for the remaining distance, and as the sun began to set, the stronghold of Iron Peak came into view. It was carved into the mountain itself, stone walls rising from living rock, watchtowers positioned at angles that provided overlapping fields of fire, gates thick enough to withstand siege weapons. This was not a palace, it was a fortress, built by wolves who understood that survival required more than strength. It required strategy. The gates opened as they approached, and Sera got her first glimpse of the pack she was supposed to lead. 200 wolves assembled in the courtyard, a full display of hierarchy and power. Warriors in the front, families in the middle, elders at the back, all of them watching as Garrett rode through with his new mate. The whispers started immediately. "Too small, too young, just like the last one. How long will this one last?" Sera sat straighter in the saddle, refusing to show weakness. Let them doubt, let them whisper. She had survived her father's house of lies. She could survive their skepticism. Garrett dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands spanned her waist easily, lifting her like she weighed nothing, and she felt the crowd's assessment shift. Fragile, breakable, doomed. But when he set her on her feet, Garrett did not release her immediately. Instead, he turned her to face the pack, his hands still on her waist, his presence at her back a clear statement. "Mine, under my protection. Challenge her and face me." It was possessive, primitive, exactly the kind of display that should have made her bristle. But Sera understood pack dynamics well enough to know that this was not about controlling her. It was about protecting her, giving her the space and authority to prove herself without having to fight for basic respect from the start. She caught movement in her peripheral vision. An older woman, scarred and gray-haired, pushing through the crowd with the authority of someone who had earned her position through blood and survival. She stopped a few feet away, her single eye sweeping over Sera with an intensity that felt like being dissected. "You look like my daughter." The woman's voice was rough as gravel. Sera's photographic memory supplied the connection instantly. Vera Cross, lead huntress, Liana's mother. "I have been told I resemble her." Sera kept her voice respectful but not submissive. Vera stepped closer, circling her like a predator evaluating prey. Garrett's hands tightened on Sera's waist, a warning growl building in his chest, but Vera ignored him. Same height, same build, same coloring. The huntress stopped in front of Sera, leaning in close enough that Sera could see the scars that mapped her face, count the silver hairs threaded through the dark. "Do you know how my daughter died?" "I know what the official reports say. The reports are lies." Vera's eye bored into hers. "I killed my daughter." The courtyard went silent. Garrett went rigid behind Sera, but Sera did not flinch, did not look away, just held the huntress's gaze and waited for the rest. "Not with my hands." Vera's voice dropped. "With my choices. Political enemies promised me they just wanted to make her weak, send her home to me where she would be safe. I gave them access, poisoned her food with bone rot curse, thought I was saving her from a life that would destroy her. And instead you destroyed her yourself." "Yes." No denial, no excuse. Just the brutal acknowledgement of guilt that Sera was learning seemed to be the currency of this place. "I have lived with that for 10 years. And if you die here, if Garrett fails to protect you or his wolf fails to control itself, I will kill him. I should have 10 years ago. I will not hesitate again." Sera studied the woman in front of her, saw the guilt carved into every line of her face, the rage barely contained, the love twisted into something toxic by loss and self-hatred. "You confessed freely." Sera's voice was quiet. "You could have stayed silent. I would never have known." "Silence is cowardice." Vera straightened. "And I am many things, but I am not a coward. You deserve to know who stands beside you and who might put a knife in your back. I will train you, protect you, do everything I failed to do for Liana. But if he hurts you, I will end him. That is my truth. Take it or leave it. Sera considered. This was not friendship being offered, not mentorship in any traditional sense. This was a bargain between two women carrying guilt and rage, promising each other honesty even when it cut. I will train with you. Sera's decision was immediate. But know this, I am not your daughter. I am not here to be saved. I am here to survive, and I will use every tool and every ally I can find to do it, including you. The corner of Vera's mouth twitched. Good. She turned to address the crowd. This one might actually make it. It was not approval, not acceptance, but it was acknowledgement. And in this place, Sera was learning that might be enough. Garrett's hands finally released her waist, sliding away slowly like he was reluctant to break contact. He moved to stand beside her instead of behind her, a subtle shift in position that spoke volumes. Not possession, partnership. My pack. His voice carried across the courtyard with alpha command that made even the most dominant wolves lower their eyes. This is Garrett Stone, my mate and your Luna. The bond is sealed, she is mine, and through me, she is yours to respect and follow. 3 days. An elder's voice rang out from the back. 3 days observation. Let us see if she is worthy before we bend knee. It was tradition, apparently. Garrett had explained it on the ride. After Liana's death, the pack had instituted a trial period for new Lunas. 3 tests to prove capability. 3 days to demonstrate they would not be another tragedy waiting to happen. Garrett looked at Sera, the question in his eyes. She could refuse, demand immediate acceptance based on the marriage bond. But that would breed resentment, and she needed allies more than she needed submission. I accept the trials. Her voice did not waver. Test me. I will prove myself worthy. The crowd murmured approval. Even skepticism was better than the pitying look she had seen when she first arrived. Garrett led her through the stronghold, up carved stone stairs, through corridors that felt older than memory. Warriors nodded as they passed, families stepped aside, and through it all Sera cataloged everything. Guard positions, defensive choke points, escape routes, the habits of survivors, always mapping their environment, always preparing for the moment things went wrong. They reached the Alpha's chambers at the top of the stronghold, a suite of rooms that overlooked the entire territory. The door was heavy oak reinforced with iron, designed to withstand assault. Garrett opened it and stood aside, letting her enter first. The space was sparse, functional. A massive bed dominated one wall, easily large enough for someone of Garrett's size. Weapons hung on racks. Maps covered a table. And in the corner, a locked cabinet that drew Sera's eye with the instinct of someone who recognized secrets when she saw them. Garrett closed and barred the door behind them, and suddenly the space felt much smaller. They were alone, truly alone for the first time since the wedding. Married, mated, expected to consummate a bond that had been forged in politics and sealed in ceremony, but had not yet been tested in the intimacy that would either make it real or destroy them both. He made no move toward her. Instead, he crossed to the weapons rack, began removing the blades he carried, the ritual of disarming that warriors performed at the end of each day. You should rest. His voice was careful. The trials begin tomorrow. You will need your strength. Where will you sleep? Here. He gestured to the bed without looking at her. We both will. Her heart rate kicked up. And nothing. He finally turned to face her. Not tonight. Not until you are ready. Not until you understand what you are choosing. I chose you when I stayed instead of running. You chose survival. His eyes were serious. That is different from choosing this. Choosing me. Maybe for you those are the same thing. They are not. He crossed the space between them, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Sera, I killed my last mate. Mercy killing, but my hands still ended her life. If I claim you, if I let the bond complete, if I take you the way my wolf demands, there is a chance I will hurt you, break you, fail to control my strength the way I failed with Liana. Or maybe you will not. Maybe. He did not sound convinced. But I need you to understand the risk. Your virgin body is smaller than mine by half. When the claiming happens, when my wolf rises and demands I mark you as mate, instinct will override control. It will hurt. You will bleed. And I will hate myself for it, but I will not be able to stop. Then do not stop. She met his eyes without flinching. I am not asking you to be gentle. I am asking you to be honest. Can you do that? Something in his expression shifted. heat and hunger, and the first crack in the control he wore like armor. Yes, the word came out rough. I can be honest. What I cannot be is safe. Good. She reached up to touch the scar on his face, tracing it with gentle fingers. I do not want safe. I want real. I want a partner who treats me like I am strong enough to handle truth. Can you do that? His hand came up to catch hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. I can try. Then try. And tomorrow, when the trials begin, I will prove to your pack that I am not Liana. I am not fragile. I am not going to break. I am going to survive you and them and everything else this world throws at me. Garrett pulled her hand down, brought it to his mouth, pressed a kiss to her palm that felt like a promise and a warning tangled together. Then survive, Sera Stone. Survive me. Because I have been alone for too long, and I am not sure I remember how to be anything else. They lay down on opposite sides of the massive bed, maintaining careful distance, the space between them charged with everything unspoken. Sera stared at the ceiling, feeling Garrett's presence like heat along her side, hearing his breathing slow as exhaustion finally dragged him towards something that might have been sleep. Tomorrow the trials would begin. Tomorrow she would have to prove herself worthy. Tomorrow the real test would start. But tonight, in the darkness of the Alpha's chambers, surrounded by weapons and maps and the ghosts of mates who had not survived, Sera made herself a promise. She would not just survive Garrett Stone, she would claim him right back. She would earn her place as Luna, not through submission, but through strength. And when the time came, when her father's crimes caught up with him, she would use every bit of power and position she had gained to make sure he paid for Eliza Thorne's death. The dead deserved justice, and Sera Ashford had a perfect memory of every crime that needed answering. She fell asleep with her hand curled around the pouch of earth from Eliza's grave, a reminder pressed against her heart. The blood remembers, and so did she. Dawn broke over Iron Peak like a blade scraping stone, cold and unforgiving. Sera woke to find Garrett already gone from the bed, standing at the window in the gray light, his silhouette carved from the same unyielding rock as the mountains surrounding them. He had not touched her during the night, had maintained the careful distance he promised, though she had felt him watching her in the darkness, heard the careful control in his breathing, sensed the war he fought with himself in every moment they shared this space. The first trial begins at midday. His voice was quiet, still facing the window. Tracking. A young wolf went missing during night patrol. Find him before sundown. How young? 16. Finn Cross. Vera's nephew. He took a slash across the ribs during training yesterday, ran into the forest in shame. Sera sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. The forest spans 50 miles in every direction. You expect me to find one injured wolf in that much territory before dark? I expect you to prove you can think like a Luna. He finally turned to face her. Or fail and go home. There was no malice in it, just fact. The pack needed proof she could lead, and leading meant solving problems that had no easy answers. She rose, crossed to the table where maps of the territory lay spread. Her photographic memory absorbed the details in seconds. Topography, water sources, known den sites, the location of the training grounds where Finn had been injured. If I fail, do I die or just face exile? Neither. Garrett moved to stand beside her. If you fail, you remain my mate, but never become Luna. The pack will tolerate you but not follow you. And when enemies come, and they will come, you will be seen as weakness to exploit rather than strength to respect. So failure means I become a liability. Yes, then I will not fail. Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Vera will escort you to the forest edge. After that, you are alone. No help, no guidance, just your skills and your choices. Sera studied the map, her mind already working through the problem. An injured 16-year-old wolf, ashamed of showing weakness, would seek isolation. Water to clean the wound. Familiar territory to feel safe. High ground to watch for pursuit. Her finger traced a path northeast. There, near the old den site by Clearwater Creek. High ground, fresh water, close enough to the training grounds that he would know the territory. Garrett leaned over the map, following her logic. Why there specifically? Because shame makes you want to hide, but injury makes you want comfort. He will go somewhere that feels like safety, somewhere he has been before, somewhere that reminds him of better days. You think like prey, trying to survive. Garrett's observation held no judgment. That is good. Most alphas think like predators hunting. They miss the obvious. I have spent my life being prey. Sera met his eyes. I know how we think. The Great Hall was already filling with pack members when they descended. Warriors preparing for patrols, families breaking fast together. Elders gathered in small groups, their eyes tracking Sera's every movement with the assessment of wolves who had survived long enough to trust nothing and verify everything. Vera waited by the main entrance, dressed in hunting leathers, a collection of wicked-looking blades strapped to her body with the casual ease of someone who had carried weapons longer than Sera had been alive. The huntress looked her over with that single, penetrating eye. You figured out where he is yet? Sera nodded. Northeast, Clearwater Creek Den site. Why there? Because injured prey seeks familiar ground, and because Finn is your nephew. He would go somewhere that reminds him of family. Somewhere you might have taken him as a child. Vera's scarred face shifted into something that might have been respect. Smart. But knowing where he is and getting there before dark through hostile forest are different problems. Then we should stop talking and start moving. The forest began at the base of the mountain, dense pine and ancient oak that blocked out the sun and turned the world into endless shadow. Vera led Sera to the edge, then stopped. From here you walk alone. The huntress pointed northeast. 3 hours if you move fast, 5 if you are careful. Choose your pace based on what you think you can handle. What would you choose? Fast. Vera's answer was immediate. In this forest, being still is more dangerous than being seen. The rogues that survived Garrett's culling know to avoid our patrols, but a lone wolf moving carefully looks like easy prey. Sera absorbed this, filing it away with everything else she was learning about survival in this new world. Then fast it is. She moved into the forest at a pace just short of running, her smaller size an advantage in the dense undergrowth. Where a larger wolf would have to force through brambles, she slipped between. Where roots threatened to trip, her careful steps found purchase. The photographic memory that had been her curse in childhood became her salvation now. She had studied the map for less than 5 minutes, but every detail remained crystalline in her mind. The fork in the deer trail at 2 miles, the fallen oak that marked the halfway point, the rise in elevation that signaled the approach to Clearwater Creek. She reached the creek in 2.5 hours, her lungs burning but her focus sharp. The den site was exactly where she had predicted, a small cave carved into the hillside by centuries of water erosion, the entrance half hidden by wild rose bushes that would tear skin from anyone careless enough to push through without respect. Finn! Her voice carried just enough to reach the cave without broadcasting her position to the forest beyond. I am Garrett Stone, your alpha's mate. I am here to bring you home. Silence, then a low growl, defensive and pained. You can threaten me, but we both know you are hurt. Sera kept her voice level. And I am not here to drag you back in shame. I am here to offer you a choice. Come willingly and walk into the stronghold with dignity. Or stay here and let infection take you while everyone whispers about the coward who ran. More silence. She waited, patient, understanding that sometimes the hardest battles were fought in silence, in the space between action and surrender. Finally, movement. Finn emerged from the cave, 16 and gangly with adolescence, his ribs wrapped in bandages already soaked through with blood and fluid. His eyes held the particular defiance of youth confronting its own mortality. Why should I trust you? His voice cracked. You are just another Luna who will die in a few months. Why does your opinion matter? Because I am the Luna who is going to survive. Sera held his gaze without flinching. And because I know what it is like to be overlooked, forgotten, expected to fail. So when I tell you that running from shame only creates more shame, I am speaking from experience. You do not know anything about me. I know you are Vera Cross's nephew. I know you took a slash during training and ran because you thought showing pain was weakness. I know you have been hiding here for 18 hours, getting worse, because pride is easier to swallow than pity. Finn's defiance cracked. They will think I am weak. They will think you are young. Sera stepped closer. There is a difference. Weakness is giving up. Youth is still learning the difference between courage and stupidity. You can recover from one. The other kills you. The boy's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of him as pain and exhaustion won the war his pride had been fighting. I do not want to be a disappointment. Then stop hiding and start proving yourself. She offered her hand. Come home. Let the healers treat you. Survive this. And tomorrow, train harder. Finn stared at her hand for a long moment. Then he took it. They walked back to Iron Peak together, Sera setting a pace the injured boy could maintain without losing face. She did not baby him, did not offer to carry his weight, just walked beside him like an equal, making conversation that had nothing to do with his injury and everything to do with treating him like he mattered. She asked him about his training, about what he wanted to become, learned that he dreamed of joining the elite scouts, the wolves who moved through hostile territory gathering intelligence that kept the pack safe. Found that his injury had come during advanced combat drills. A test he had been failing before the slash across his ribs gave him an excuse to run. "I am not good enough," he admitted as they navigated a rocky slope. "The other trainees are faster, stronger. They do not struggle like I do." Sera paused, considering her words carefully. Being good enough is not the same as being the best. The scouts do not need another warrior who can overpower enemies. They need someone smart enough to avoid fights that cannot be won, someone observant enough to see what others miss, someone who knows when pride is less important than survival. That sounds like cowardice, does it? She met his eyes. Or does it sound like someone who understands that living to fight another day takes more courage than dying pointlessly? The boy fell silent, processing. They walked the rest of the way without speaking, but Sera felt the shift in him, the shame transforming into something that might eventually become wisdom. The gates opened as the sun touched the horizon, the timing close enough to deadline that the pack had gathered to see if their new Luna would return at all, let alone successful. Finn walked through the gates on his own feet, his head high despite the pain etched into his young face. Sera walked beside him, not ahead, not behind. Partners in survival rather than rescuer and rescued. Vera was waiting in the courtyard. Her eye swept over her nephew, cataloging the worsening state of his injury, and Sera saw the war in the huntress's expression. Relief and fury and something that might have been pride, all tangled together. "You found him," Vera's voice was gravel rough. "He found himself." Sera stepped back, giving Finn space. "I just reminded him where home was." Garrett appeared from the crowd, his presence commanding immediate silence. His eyes went to Finn first, assessing the injury with a warrior's practiced evaluation, then to Sera. "You brought him back alive." He brought himself back. "I just walked with him." The corner of Garrett's mouth twitched, a hint of approval that felt more valuable than open praise. The first trial is complete. The pack acknowledges Lunastone's success. The gathered wolves murmured their agreement. Not enthusiastic, not warm, but respect was being earned in increments, and Sera would take what she could get. That night, alone in the Alpha's chambers, Sera examined herself in the polished metal mirror. Scratches from the rose thorns marked her arms, dirt stained her clothes, exhaustion pulled at her bones. But her eyes held something new, not confidence exactly, determination. The knowledge that she could face a challenge and win not through strength, but through understanding what was needed and delivering it. She heard Garrett enter, his footsteps heavy on the stone floor. He stopped behind her, close enough that she could feel his heat, see his reflection watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You did well today." His voice was low. "Better than well. You thought like a Luna. Put the pack member's dignity ahead of your own success. That is rare." "I just did what made sense." What made sense was dragging him back to prove you could complete the task. His hands came up to rest on her shoulders, light enough to be permission rather than possession. What you did was harder. You let him keep his pride while still achieving the goal. That takes wisdom most alphas never learn. Sera met his eyes in the mirror. "What did you do when Liana completed her trials?" "I celebrated her success and tried to pretend I was not terrified of failing her." His reflection held ghosts, memories swimming behind his eyes. She was so small, so determined, so convinced she could handle whatever came, and I was already in love with her. "But not the way you are supposed to love a mate." "No." His hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. "I loved her the way you love something fragile and precious, something you want to protect, not something you want to build a life with as an equal. And with me? With you, I am starting to realize I might not have to choose between protection and partnership." His breath stirred her hair. "If you survive me, if I do not break you the way I am terrified I will." "What if I'm not breakable?" "Then you will be the first Luna in generations to prove it." She turned in his grip, facing him directly now, close enough to count the scars on his face. "Stop waiting for me to break. I am not going to give you permission to hold back forever. I am not waiting for permission." He cupped her face with hands that could crush stone, but touched her like she was made of morning light. I am waiting until you understand what you are asking for. When I claim you, Sera, when I let the bond complete, it will not be gentle. It will not be easy. My wolf will rise and demand things your body has never given, and I need you to choose that with full knowledge of what it means. Then tell me. Show me. Stop protecting me from truth and let me decide if I'm strong enough to handle it. Something broke in his expression. Heat and hunger, and the beginning of surrender. Tomorrow, after the second trial, when you have proven yourself again, then I will show you exactly what claiming me means. It was promise and threat and plea all tangled together. Sera felt heat coil low in her belly, anticipation and nervousness warring for dominance. Then I will pass the second trial. She held his gaze without wavering. And tomorrow night, you will stop holding back. The second trial came with dawn. The great hall filled with two families who had been feuding for 3 generations, their anger so old that no one could remember what started it, only that blood had been spilled, and revenge demanded more blood in an endless cycle. Garrett presented this problem with the blunt efficiency of an alpha who had dealt with this particular conflict too many times to have patience left. The Thornbacks and the Shadowpaws have been at each other's throats since before I took leadership. 12 deaths, countless injuries, wasted resources that should go to defending our borders from real enemies. Luna Stone, you will settle this dispute. Final ruling, no appeals. Sera stood before the assembled families, seeing the hatred carved into their faces like scars. The elders glared at each other with the special venom of people who had made an enemy their entire identity. The younger generation looked tired, like they were exhausted from fighting a war that was not theirs, but had been inherited like a curse. She spent the morning interviewing each family separately, listening to grievances that went back decades, cataloging the deaths, the insults, the territory disputes that had morphed over time from concrete problems into abstract hatred. The Thornback elders spoke of betrayal at the winter hunt 40 years ago. The Shadowpaw matriarch countered with accusations of poisoned water sources 30 years back. Each family had their litany of crimes, their evidence of treachery, their proof that the other side could never be trusted. But her photographic memory caught something the families themselves seemed to have forgotten. The names of the dead, the dates of the incidents, the pattern that emerged when you laid it all out on paper. Every major escalation happened in spring. Every death occurred within weeks of a young wolf reaching mating age. The hatred was not random. It was cyclical, predictable, almost ritualistic in its repetition. She interviewed the younger generation separately, away from their elders' watchful eyes, found them weary of the conflict they had inherited, resentful of the violence demanded in the name of honor they did not feel. And in their careful words and avoided glances, she pieced together the truth the families refused to see. By midday, she had her answer. She called both families back to the Great Hall, along with Garrett and the Council of Elders. When everyone was assembled, she presented her findings with the clinical precision of someone dissecting a corpse to find cause of death. Your feud began 63 years ago. A Thornback male and a Shadowpaw female fell in love. Their families forbade the union. The young wolves ran away together. They were caught at the border by a rogue pack and killed. Both families blamed each other for the deaths instead of the rogues who actually committed the murders. The elders shifted, uncomfortable. That was ancient history. That was the root. Sera's voice cut through the murmurs. And the pattern has repeated every generation since. Your children fall in love. You forbid it. They run or hide or fight. Someone dies. You blame each other. The cycle continues. Lies. The Thornback elder's face was purple with rage. We would never allow our blood to mix with theirs. Then explain why your grandson has been meeting Lyra Shadowpaw in secret for the past 8 months. Sera produced the evidence she had gathered through careful questioning of the younger pack members, letters, testimony from witnesses, a clear pattern of romance hidden from families too consumed by hatred to see what was growing in the shadows. The Shadowpaw elder went pale. Lyra would never. Ask her yourself. Sera gestured, and the girl in question stepped forward from where she had been standing in the crowd, her hand clutched tight in the Thornback boy's grip. They looked terrified, because they know what happened to the last generation who dared to love across your imaginary lines. The hall erupted in chaos, shouts of betrayal, demands for punishment. The two young wolves stood together, facing their family's fury with the desperate courage of people who had nothing left to lose. Garrett's alpha command cracked through the noise like thunder. Silence. The hall fell quiet instantly. All eyes turned to Sera, waiting for her ruling. This was the test. How she handled this would define her leadership style for years to come. "Here is my decision." She kept her voice level, projecting calm authority even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "The feud ends today. Both families will merge territories. Lyra Shadowpaw and Marcus Thornback will marry, uniting the bloodlines. You will share hunting grounds, share resources, and learn to function as a single extended family rather than enemies." "Never," the Thornback elder spat. "I would rather die than call them family." "Then die." Sera's tone went cold. "Because those are your options. Accept my ruling and live in peace, or reject it and be exiled from Iron Peak entirely. Both families, every member, gone by sunset." The crowd gasped. It was brutal, uncompromising, exactly the kind of hard line that could backfire spectacularly or cement her authority permanently. "You cannot exile us." The Shadowpaw elder's voice shook. "We have been pack for generations, and you have been poison for generations." Sera stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding the space through pure force of will. "You have wasted our resources, divided our strength, taught your children that hatred is more important than survival. That ends now. Not because I am cruel, because I am practical. We have enemies at the borders, real threats, and I will not allow internal bleeding to weaken us when we need every wolf strong." Garrett watched from his position at the head of the hall, his expression unreadable. He had given her full authority, but she knew one word from him could overturn her ruling. The entire pack waited to see if he would back her or undermine her. "The Luna has spoken." His voice carried absolute finality. "Her ruling stands. Both families have until sunset to decide. Peace or exile. Choose." The Thornback and Shadowpaw elders looked at each other across decades of hatred. Sera could see the war being fought behind their eyes. Pride versus survival. Tradition versus practical necessity. The weight of generations versus the uncertain future. Finally, the Shadowpaw elder broke. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked at her granddaughter with something that might have been understanding breaking through the anger. "We accept the Luna's ruling." Her voice was barely above a whisper. The Thornback elder took longer. His jaw worked, his hands clenched into fists, and for a moment Sera thought he would choose exile rather than bend. But then he saw his grandson's face, saw the hope and fear warring there, and something in him cracked. "We accept." The hall erupted again, but this time with a different energy. Shock, relief, the beginning of something that might eventually become acceptance. Sera turned to the young couple. "You will marry within the month. Your first child will carry both family names, and you will raise them to understand that love is stronger than hatred, even when hatred has had generations to grow roots." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Luna." "Do not thank me yet." Sera's smile was sharp. "You are going to spend the rest of your lives proving that this was worth the risk. Fail, and you will have destroyed two families for nothing. Succeed, and you will have saved them both." That evening, as the sun set over Iron Peak, Sera stood on the battlements and watched the Thornback and Shadowpaw families begin the awkward process of merging territories. It was tense, uncomfortable, but it was happening. Garrett joined her, his presence warm against the cold mountain wind. "You took a significant risk today." "I know. You could have chosen a safer solution, divided the territories, maintained separation, kept the peace without forcing integration. That would not have solved anything. It would have just delayed the next crisis." She leaned against the stone wall, feeling the exhaustion of the day settle into her bones. Real solutions require real change, even when change is uncomfortable. Liana tried to make everyone happy. His voice held old pain. She mediated conflicts by finding middle ground, compromise, ways for both sides to feel like they won something. The pack loved her for it, but it did not work. No, because some problems do not have comfortable solutions. They require someone willing to draw hard lines and enforce them even when it makes you unpopular. "And you think I can be that someone?" "I think you already are." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You are not trying to be loved, Sera. You are trying to be effective. That is what Iron Peak needs. What I need." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "What do you need, Garrett?" "A partner. Someone strong enough to make the choices I cannot make because I am too close. Someone who can see the pack's needs with clear eyes instead of through the filter of my own guilt and history. He pulled her closer, his voice dropping. Someone who can survive me when I stop holding back. Then stop holding back. Show me what you have been protecting me from. His control cracked. She saw it happen, saw the moment the restraint that had been holding him together for days finally snapped under the weight of wanting and waiting and being so carefully gentle when everything in him demanded he take what was his. His mouth came down on hers like a storm breaking, all heat and hunger and desperate need. Not gentle, not tentative, claiming. His hands slid into her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and Sera felt the bond between them flare like lightning connecting earth to sky. She had been kissed before, fumbling attempts in her youth, political necessity at formal functions, but this was different. This was being consumed, devoured, remade in the space between one breath and the next. When he finally tore his mouth from hers, they were both breathing hard. His eyes had shifted, more wolf than man, burning with an intensity that should have frightened her, but instead made heat coil through her entire body. Not here. His voice was rough, barely human, not where the pack can see. He picked her up with terrifying ease and carried her from the battlements, through corridors that blurred past in her peripheral vision, into the Alpha's chambers where he kicked the door shut behind them and set her down with a gentleness that contradicted the hunger blazing in his eyes. Last chance. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. Tell me no. Tell me you are not ready. Give me a reason to stop, because once I start, Sera, I am not going to be able to pull back. My wolf is going to rise. And when that happens, when instinct takes over, it is going to hurt you. Your virgin body is not ready for what mine demands. I am stronger than you think. I know. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. But strong does not mean indestructible. And I need you to understand that when this happens, when I claim you the way my wolf requires, there is a chance I will break something in you that cannot be fixed. Then we will find out if I can survive you. She reached up to pull his face down to hers. Stop protecting me from yourself. I chose you, all of you, even the parts you are afraid to show. The last thread of his control shattered. His hands were everywhere, mapping her through fabric that suddenly felt like a barrier she needed gone. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, carried her to the bed, laid her down with a reverence that warred with the hunger she could feel vibrating through every muscle of his frame. Tell me if it is too much. His voice was strained. Tell me if I need to stop. But his hands were already working the laces of her dress, pulling fabric away to reveal skin he had been denied touching for days. His mouth followed his hands, tasting her collarbone, the hollow of her throat, the swell of her breast. Each touch made her shiver, made her understand why he had been so terrified of this moment. Because she could feel the barely leashed power in him, sense how close he was to forgetting to be careful. When his hand slid between her thighs, when she felt the blunt pressure of him against her entrance, her body tensed involuntarily. He was too large, she was too small. This was not going to work. Breathe. His command cut through her panic. Your body can take mine. It was made to take mine, but you have to trust me. You have to relax. She tried to breathe through the burning stretch as he pushed forward, tried to relax muscles that were screaming at her to flee. But he was relentless, advancing inch by impossible inch, and the pain built until she could not hold back the whimper that escaped. I am sorry. He stilled, buried only halfway inside her, trembling with the effort of holding still. I am so sorry. I know it hurts, but you are doing so well. Just a little more. He pushed deeper, and Sera felt the moment something inside her gave way. Sharp pain that made her cry out, her hands scrabbling against his shoulders, her body trying to reject the invasion it was not prepared to handle. But Garrett did not stop, could not stop. She felt it through the bond, the moment his wolf rose and demanded completion. His hips drew back and thrust forward again, burying himself completely in one smooth stroke that forced her virgin body to adjust, to accept, to yield. It hurt. More than she had anticipated. More than she thought she could endure. But underneath the pain was something else, something that felt like rightness, like two pieces of a puzzle finally clicking together even though the fit required breaking and reshaping to make it work. He moved, and she could do nothing but hold on as he claimed her with deep, powerful thrusts that forced her body to learn what it meant to be his. His mouth found her throat, teeth grazing over her pulse point, and she felt the bond between them snap into place with a force that stole her breath. Suddenly she could feel everything he felt. The guilt at hurting her tangled with the satisfaction of finally marking what was his. The terror of breaking her warring with the desperate need to complete the bond. The love he had been too afraid to name, bleeding through the connection they now shared. Through the bond she felt memories that were not hers. Liana's last moments, her forgiveness whispered through pain. Years of isolation, touching no one, trusting nothing. The weight of command that crushed softer men. And underneath it all, the desperate hope that maybe this time, with this woman, he could be more than the monster his guilt insisted he was. She sent back her own truth through the newly forged connection. Her father's crimes witnessed in shadow. 8 years of silence corroding her from inside. The choice to come here not as victim, but as player in her own story. And the realization, crystallizing in this moment of pain and connection, that she had stopped surviving and started living the moment she chose to trust him with her body and her truth. It overwhelmed her. The physical pain and the emotional intensity and the sensation of being connected to another soul so completely that she could not tell where she ended and he began. Her body clenched around him involuntarily, and she felt his control shatter completely. He drove into her with abandon, chasing his release with single-minded focus. And when it came, when she felt him spill inside her with a roar that echoed through the chambers, the bond completed with a finality that left them both gasping. Garrett collapsed beside her, pulling her against his chest, his hands gentle now as they swept over her body, checking for damage beyond the expected soreness. "Did I break you?" His voice was wrecked. "No." She pressed her face against his shoulder, feeling the aftershock still rippling through her. "You claimed me. There is a difference. Tell me the truth. Are you all right?" "I hurt." She was too exhausted to lie, but I survived. "So yes, I am all right." His arms tightened around her. "I will be more careful next time." "Will there be a next time?" The question hung between them. He could have chosen to keep distance now that the bond was sealed, could have treated her with the careful respect of a political arrangement completed. Instead, he pulled her impossibly closer. "There will be as many next times as you can handle. Because now that I know you can survive me, I am not going to be able to keep my hands off you." "Good." She tilted her face up to his. "I did not survive you just to be treated like something fragile again." His laugh was rough and surprised. "You are going to be trouble, Sera Stone." "I certainly hope so." They fell asleep, tangled together, the bond between them humming with new connection. And sometime in the deep hours of night, Sera woke to find someone standing at the foot of their bed. A woman, translucent, familiar, looking exactly like Sera but older, sadder, dead. Liana's ghost smiled with hollow eyes. "You can see me. Good, we need to talk." Sera's scream woke Garrett, but by the time his eyes focused on where she was staring, the ghost had already disappeared like morning mist burned away by sudden sun. "What is wrong?" He was already moving, scanning for threats, his warrior instincts taking over. "I saw her." Sera's voice shook. "I saw Liana. She was standing right there." Garrett went very still. "That is not possible." "I know what I saw. You were dreaming." "I was awake." She met his eyes, seeing the denial there, the refusal to believe, and she said we needed to talk. But Garrett did not believe in ghosts, did not believe in anything he could not touch or fight or kill, so he held Sera close and told her it was just stress, just exhaustion, just her mind playing tricks after everything she had been through. He believed what he said. Sera could feel his certainty through the bond, but she had seen Liana's ghost, had felt the cold that came with the dead, had seen the warning in those hollow eyes. And as she lay in Garrett's arms, listening to him sleep, Sera knew with absolute certainty that the third trial would not be the hardest challenge she faced. The hardest challenge would be convincing her mate that the dead did not stay buried in Iron Peak, that some ghost demanded more than acknowledgement. They demanded justice. The ghost came again 3 nights later. Sera was alone in the Alpha's chambers, Garrett having been called to the eastern border, where scouts reported unusual rogue activity. She sat at his desk, studying supply manifests and patrol rotations, learning the rhythm of pack management that would be expected of a Luna. The temperature dropped so suddenly her breath misted in the air. The candles flickered despite the absence of wind, And when she looked up, Liana stood in the corner, more solid than before, her dead eyes fixed on Sera with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "You need to stop ignoring me." Liana's voice was hollow, echoing like it came from the bottom of a well. "I am trying to help you." Sera's hand moved slowly toward the iron dagger Vera had given her. Iron disrupted magic, could cut through supernatural manifestations. Whether that applied to ghosts, she did not know, but having a weapon made her feel less helpless. "Help me with what?" "Surviving him." The ghost moved closer, gliding across the floor without footsteps. "You think you know what he is capable of. You think the claiming was the worst of it, but you have not seen what he does when he chooses pack over mate, when he calculates your value and decides you are expendable. He told me about the antidote, about choosing pack stability over saving you. He told you his version." Liana's form flickered, anger making her less substantial. "He did not tell you that he had the antidote for 3 weeks before using it, that he watched me suffer, watched my bones begin to crack, and did nothing because he wanted to see who the poisoner was. He used me as bait, Sera, conscious bait, and when the trap failed to spring, when he still had not identified his enemy, he killed me to cover his failure." "That contradicts what he said." "Of course it does. He is lying, or he has convinced himself of a more palatable truth." The ghost's face twisted. "Either way, the result is the same. I died, and you will too if you trust him." Sera studied the apparition before her, weighing possibilities. Either Liana's ghost was real and telling the truth, or someone was using magic to manipulate her perception, to drive a wedge between her and Garrett. Either option was dangerous. "If you are real, prove it. Tell me something only you would know, something I cannot verify through documents or witnesses." Liana smiled, sad and knowing. "The locked cabinet in the corner, the one he thinks is secret. Inside is my journal. Read the last entry dated 3 days before I died, then decide who is telling the truth." The ghost faded, leaving Sera alone in the sudden warmth of returning candle flame. She stood, crossed to the cabinet Liana had indicated, and examined the lock. It was complex, designed to resist picking, but Sera had been studying locks since she was 14, learning skills that came in useful when you needed to uncover buried secrets. 20 minutes of careful work and the mechanism clicked open. Inside, she found exactly what Liana had described. A leather-bound journal, its pages filled with elegant handwriting that grew increasingly shaky toward the end. Medical records documenting the progression of bone rot poisoning. And underneath everything, a bundle of letters tied with black ribbon. Sera pulled out the journal and turned to the final entries. "Week 9 of illness. The pain is constant now. Garrett knows. I told him 3 weeks ago. He promised he would fix this, would find who poisoned me and make them pay. But nothing has changed. I am getting worse. Week 10. I confronted him, demanded to know why he has not used the antidote I know he possesses. He says using it will alert the conspirators, will trigger civil war before he is ready. I asked him how ready he needs to be while I am dying. He had no answer. Week 11. I understand now. He is waiting, watching, using my suffering to expose his enemies. I am bait in a trap that has not sprung. I told him I understand why, told him I accept the Alpha's choice, but I wish he had been honest with me from the start. Wish he had given me the choice to be bait instead of making it for me." Final entry, dated 3 days before her death. "The bones in my left hand cracked today. Garrett held me while I screamed. He cried. I have never seen him cry before. He begged me to forgive him, said he would use the antidote tomorrow, would end this regardless of the political cost. I told him no. Told him if I have suffered this long, we should see it through. Either the trap springs and my pain has purpose, or it does not, and I have been tortured for nothing. But we are too far in to stop now. I think I am dying. I think the poison has progressed too far. I think tomorrow will not come for me. If anyone reads this, know that Garrett Stone is not a monster. He is an alpha who made an impossible choice and lives with the guilt. Do not blame him for my death. Blame the cowards who poisoned me. Blame the political system that forces alphas to calculate lives like currency. Blame the world that created the choice. But do not blame him. He loved me, just not more than he loved his pack. Sera sat back, the journal heavy in her hands. The truth was more complicated than either version she had been told. Garrett had used Liana as bait, had chosen investigation over immediate treatment, but Liana had known, had consented, had told him to continue even as she died. The ghost's version was technically accurate but stripped of context, designed to breed distrust, which meant someone wanted her to doubt Garrett, wanted the bond between them weakened, wanted Iron Peak's Alpha and Luna divided when they needed to be strongest. The question was why? The answer came at dawn, delivered by a blood-soaked scout who collapsed in the courtyard with an arrow through his shoulder. "Drake is coming." The scout's words bubbled with blood. 300 warriors, 5 days out. He demands surrender of the Ashford murderer and cession of Eastern territories, compliance or total war. Garrett stood over the wounded wolf, his face carved from stone, his tactical mind already working through scenarios and options. "Get him to the healers." He looked up at Marcus. "Full war council. Now." The great hall filled within the hour. Every senior warrior, every pack elder, Vera and her huntresses, and Sera, standing at Garrett's side because she was Luna now, and war concerned her as much as anyone. Marcus spread maps across the table, his expression grim. "Drake has numbers advantage. 300 to our 200. He has terrain advantage coming through the lowlands. And he has purpose. He wants blood for Eliza Thorne's murder." "We could give him the murderer," an elder spoke up. "Sera's father deserves execution. Turn him over. Avoid the war." "No." Sera's voice cut through the murmurs. "My father deserves death, but giving him to Drake accomplishes nothing. Drake does not want justice. He wants Eliza, and since he thinks she is dead, he will take his grief out on whoever is available. Surrendering my father just shows weakness." "Then what do you propose?" Marcus's tone was skeptical. "We cannot win a direct assault, not with his numbers." "We do not fight a direct assault." Sera moved to the maps, her photographic memory overlaying terrain features with strategic possibilities. "Drake is coming through the lowlands because it is the fastest route, but fast means predictable. We know exactly where he will be and when. And knowing that helps us how? We still cannot match his numbers in open battle. We do not match them. We divide them." Her finger traced paths on the map. "Hit his supply lines here. Force him to split forces to protect his rear. Ambush his scouts here to blind him. Then fortify the stronghold and make him pay in blood for every inch of approach. That is defensive strategy." Marcus leaned forward. "It might let us survive, but it does not win the war. Drake will just settle in for siege, which is when we negotiate." Sera met his eyes, from a position of strength. "After we have proven we can hurt him, after he has lost enough warriors to question whether revenge is worth the cost." Garrett had been silent, watching her lay out the strategy with an expression Sera could not quite read. Now he spoke, his voice carrying alpha authority that commanded immediate attention. "She is right. We cannot win this war through strength. We win through attrition and will. Make Drake pay for every mile, every day, every small victory. Bleed him until negotiation looks better than continued loss." The council murmured agreement, but Sera could see the doubt in their eyes. They did not trust her strategic thinking yet, did not believe a young Luna barely past her trials could read warfare better than seasoned veterans. An elder cleared his throat. "The third trial, combat readiness. She has not yet faced it." Garrett's response was immediate. "She is facing it now. War strategy is the ultimate combat trial. She either proves herself capable of leading us through this, or she proves she cannot. There will be no better test." The elder subsided. The pack watched Sera with new assessment, understanding that the trial they had planned was being replaced by something far more brutal and real. Marcus voiced what others were thinking. "With respect, Luna, defensive strategy only works if we have something Drake wants more than revenge. What leverage do we have?" Sera took a breath, knowing what she was about to reveal would change everything. "Eliza Thorne is alive." The hall erupted, shouts of disbelief, demands for proof, accusations of lies. Garrett's hand found hers under the table, squeezing hard enough to hurt, his shock bleeding through their bond. "Explain." His voice was alpha command directed at his mate, and Sera felt the weight of it demanding truth. "My father did not kill her. He sold her to Northern Alliance. They wanted her bloodline for breeding programs. She survived, escaped, has been living in hiding for 8 years under an assumed name." "How do you know this?" "I found documents in my father's safe before I left." correspondence with Northern Alliance, payment records, and a final note indicating Eliza escaped their facility 6 years ago. She has been free since then. Where is she now? I do not know exactly, but I know how to find her. She pulled out one of the letters she had stolen from her father's office, the one that mentioned Shadowmere, a healer's sanctuary in neutral territory. If she wanted to disappear, that is where she would go. Marcus was staring at her like she had grown a second head. You have known this since before the wedding and said nothing? I said nothing because I needed to survive first. Sera met his gaze without flinching. Information is power. I was not going to spend my only leverage before I had position to use it. Garrett released her hand. The bond between them vibrated with complicated emotions. Anger at the deception, respect for the strategy, fear of what this revelation meant. If Eliza is alive and we can prove it, Drake will want her returned. He spoke slowly, working through implications. That gives us negotiating power, but it also means forcing a woman back into a bond she escaped. Unless we do not force her. Sera leaned forward. What if we find her, ask her what she wants, and let her decide? If she wants to return, we broker peace. If she refuses, we help her stay hidden and find other terms. And if she refuses and Drake demands her anyway? Vera's voice was sharp. Do we go to war to protect one woman's freedom? Yes. Sera's answer was immediate. Because if we do not, we prove that women in this world are currency to be traded, that our choices do not matter, that we exist to serve pack politics rather than live our own lives. The hall went silent. Every female wolf was staring at Sera with expressions ranging from shock to fierce approval. The males looked uncomfortable, confronted with a truth they had never had to face. Garrett stood. We find Eliza Thorne, we give her the choice, and we prepare for war regardless of her decision, because Drake is coming whether we negotiate or not. He looked at Sera, and she saw the question in his eyes. The ghost had been right about one thing. Garrett was capable of sacrificing a mate for pack stability. The question was whether he would make that choice again. Sera, you will lead the expedition to find Eliza. Take Vera and Cade. You have 4 days before Drake arrives. Cade was the exile who had returned 2 days prior, the warrior who had been cast out 5 years ago for mercy, killing a suffering packmate against Garrett's orders. He had approached the border under white flag, claiming he had intelligence about who poisoned Liana, asking for a chance to come home. Garrett had allowed him back on house arrest, unsure whether to trust him. Now he was being sent on a critical mission. Why Cade? Marcus demanded. He is barely more than a prisoner. Because he spent 5 years working for Northern Alliance. Garrett's tone was flat. If anyone knows how to navigate their networks and safe houses, it is him. And because if he betrays us, he is far enough from Iron Peak that the damage is contained. Cade stepped forward from where he had been standing against the wall. I will not betray you. His voice was quiet but firm. I want to come home. I will do whatever it takes to earn that. Then prove it. Garrett's eyes were hard. Bring back Eliza Thorne alive and willing to talk. That earns you consideration for reinstatement. The expedition left within the hour. Sera, Vera, and Cade, traveling light and fast through territory that grew increasingly wild the farther they moved from civilization. 2 days of hard riding brought them to Shadowmere, a collection of stone buildings clustered around natural hot springs, protected by ancient treaties that made it neutral ground where even blood enemies could seek healing without fear of violence. The healer who greeted them was ancient, her face so weathered it was impossible to guess her age. She looked at Sera with eyes that seemed to see through flesh to the bones beneath. You seek the one who calls herself Isla, not a question. Yes. Sera kept her voice respectful. We need to speak with her. Why? To offer her a choice, truth or continued hiding, freedom or forced return. We will abide by whatever she decides. The healer studied her for a long moment. Most who come seeking her bring chains, not choices. You are different. I'm trying to be. The old woman nodded. She is in the garden, tending roses. She has been here 6 years, worked hard to earn peace. Do not destroy it lightly. The garden was exactly as described. Roses in every color, carefully tended, blooming despite the late season. And kneeling among them, scissors in hand, was a woman who looked so much like Sera that it was like staring into a mirror that showed her future. Isla looked up as they approached. Her face went through a cascade of emotions: recognition, fear, resignation. She stood slowly, setting down the scissors, her hands remarkably steady for someone confronting her past. You are Ashford blood. I can see it in your face. Sera Ashford Stone. I am married to Garrett Stone of Iron Peak, and you are Eliza Thorne, though you have been calling yourself Isla Drake for 6 years. That name is dead. Isla's voice was firm. I buried her when I escaped. Rowan Drake is coming to Iron Peak with 300 warriors. He wants blood for your murder. He has been searching for you for 8 years, broken by grief, convinced you are dead. Good, let him grieve. It is less than I suffered. Sera stepped closer. I am not here to judge you. I am here to give you information and a choice. Drake thinks you are dead. If we confirm that, give him closure, he might negotiate peace. If we tell him you are alive, he will demand your return. Either way, the choice is yours. There is no choice. Isla's laugh was bitter. If you tell him I am alive, he will come for me, will drag me back, will force the bond I spent 8 years escaping. Your choice is an illusion. Not if we protect you, Vera spoke up. Not if we go to war to defend your freedom, if that is what you choose. Isla turned to stare at the huntress. You would go to war for me? A stranger? Why? Because you deserve the right to choose your own life. Sera's voice was quiet. Because I watched my father murder your predecessor and I stayed silent. Because I have spent 8 years being complicit in crimes against women. Because I am trying to be better than the world that created these choices. Isla sank down onto the stone bench, her composure cracking. Tell me about him. About Rowan. Is he well? Physically, yes. Emotionally, he is destroyed. He has spent 8 years hunting for proof of what happened to you. He thinks my father killed you. He wants revenge for your death. Does he ever speak of me? Cade answered, his voice gentle. He speaks of nothing else. Every decision is filtered through what you would have wanted. Every negotiation includes terms that honor your memory. He has built his entire identity around grief for losing you. Isla's eyes filled with tears. I did not want that. I just wanted to breathe, to think without his alpha dominance crushing my mind, to be myself instead of an extension of his will. Sera sat beside her. Tell me what it was like. The bond. Suffocating. Isla's voice dropped to a whisper. I was 19 when we were bonded. Political arrangement. He was 37, powerful, commanding. The bond formed, and suddenly I could not think my own thoughts without feeling his presence, could not make decisions without his will influencing mine. It was not cruel. He did not mean to overwhelm me. But alpha dominance is not something they can turn off, and I was drowning. So you ran. I tried to. Your father found me, promised sanctuary, delivered me to Northern Alliance instead. They wanted my bloodline, kept me prisoner for 2 years, forced medical procedures to try to extract viable eggs for their breeding program. Her hands clenched. I was pregnant when they took me. Rowan's child. The stress, the procedures, I miscarried at 4 months. After that, they had no use for me. Let their guard down. I escaped, came here, started over. I am sorry. The words felt inadequate. For everything you have suffered. Do not be sorry. Isla met her eyes. Tell me what you need. The truth. What do you need from me to save your pack? Sera laid it out honestly. Drake's demands, the coming war, the options available, the consequences of each choice. When she finished, Isla sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. I will not return to him. Not willingly, not ever. But I will write him a letter, explaining, telling him the truth, giving him closure without giving him me. Will that be enough? Sera did not know, could not promise it would prevent war, but it was more than they had before. It is a start. They returned to Iron Peak with Isla's letter and a plan that was more hope than strategy. 3 days before Drake's army was expected to arrive, Sera stood before the War Council and presented their options. We send Drake the letter. Let him know Eliza is alive, chose to leave, and does not want to return. We offer terms, shared trade routes, defense alliance against Northern Alliance, political partnership that benefits both packs. And if he rejects the terms and demands her anyway? Marcus asked. Then we fight. Sera's voice was steady. And we make it cost him so much that he questions whether forced reunion with a woman who does not want him is worth losing half his warriors. The council voted. Not unanimous, but majority approved. The letter would be sent. The terms would be offered. And the defenses would be prepared for when Drake inevitably rejected both. But that night, alone in the Alpha's chambers with Garrett, Sera felt the weight of what was coming. You are risking everything for one woman's freedom. Garrett stood at the window, his back to her. Why? Because it is right. Right does not always win wars. No. She moved to stand beside him. But it is worth fighting for anyway. He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. If it comes down to a choice, if Drake demands we turn over Eliza and threatens to burn Iron Peak if we refuse, what will you choose? I will choose to let her make her own choice, even if it costs us everything. That is not practical. I know. She reached up to touch his face. But you married me knowing I was not practical. You married me knowing I would push back when you made choices I disagreed with. So here I am, pushing back. We do not trade women like currency. Not anymore. Not while I am Luna. Garrett pulled her close, his arms tight around her. You are going to get us all killed with your principles. Maybe. She pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Or maybe we will prove that some things are worth dying for. The letter reached Drake 2 days before his army arrived. His response came back within hours. One word written in handwriting that shook with rage. Never. The war came at dawn on the 5th day. Drake's forces hit the outer defenses with brutal efficiency. 300 warriors moving in coordinated strikes designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers. But Sera's strategy had prepared for this. Supply caches burned before Drake could secure them. Scouts died in their sleep, throats cut by huntresses who moved like shadows. The main force found themselves harassed by hit-and-run attacks that bled them without committing to full engagement. By the 2nd day, Drake had lost 40 warriors and gained barely a mile of territory. Sera watched from the stronghold walls, tracking troop movements, coordinating defensive positions, making real-time adjustments as the battle evolved. Garrett fought on the front lines, his presence inspiring the warriors who followed him into combat that was less glorious battle and more grinding attrition. On the 3rd day, Drake himself appeared at the base of the stronghold, calling for parley under white flag. Garrett met him in the neutral ground between armies, Sera at his side despite his protests, both of them flanked by guards but close enough to speak without shouting. Rowan Drake was exactly as described, massive, scarred, his eyes hollow with years of searching and grief. He looked at Sera, and his breath caught. You look like her. His voice was rough. Exactly like her. We are distant cousins, same bloodline. Sera kept her tone respectful. That is why my father chose to sell her to Northern Alliance. The resemblance made her valuable for their breeding programs. Your father will die for that. Drake's promise was absolute. But first, you will tell me where Eliza is. Her name is Isla now, and no, I will not tell you where she is. I will burn this stronghold to the ground, kill every wolf inside, leave nothing but ashes and bones. You will try. Sera did not back down. And you will lose half your remaining warriors doing it. Is forced reunion with a woman who does not want you worth that cost? She is my mate, my bond, mine. She was never yours. Sera's voice went hard. You shared a bond. That is not the same as ownership. And she chose to break that bond. Chose freedom over connection. You need to respect that. Drake's control cracked. His hand shot out, faster than Sera could track, catching her throat and lifting her off the ground. Garrett roared and shifted mid-lunge, but Drake's guards intercepted, creating a barrier of bodies that held the Alpha back while their leader squeezed. Tell me where she is. Drake's voice was barely human. Or I crush your throat. Sera could not breathe, could not speak, but she locked eyes with Drake and refused to break. Refused to give him what he wanted, refused to trade Isla's freedom for her own life. The world was going dark at the edges when another voice cut through the chaos. Let her go, Rowan. Drake froze. His head whipped around to see Isla standing at the edge of the clearing, flanked by Vera and Cade, her chin high despite the fear in her eyes. Eliza, Drake's voice broke. You are alive. My name is Isla, and yes, I am alive. I escaped. I chose freedom, and I choose it still. She walked forward slowly, and Drake released Sera, letting her drop to the ground where she gasped for air while Garrett pulled her back behind his protective bulk. Drake stared at the woman he had searched for, his face cycling through emotions too fast to catalog. You left me. You let me think you were dead. I could not breathe around you. Isla's voice was steady. Your alpha dominance, it was not your fault, but it was destroying me. I had to leave. I would have changed, would have learned to control it. You cannot control what you are any more than I could control drowning. She stopped a few feet from him. I do not hate you, Rowan. But I cannot be bonded to you, cannot be what you need me to be. Then what do I do? His question was raw. I have spent 8 years searching for you, built my entire life around getting you back. What do I do now? Let me go. Tears tracked down her face. Grieve what we were, but let me go and build a life that is not built on my ghost. Drake stood in silence for a long moment, his army behind him, Iron Peak's defenders on the walls, and between them, the woman he had loved and lost and found and could not keep. Finally, he spoke. I want the bond severed, completely. No connection, no pull, nothing left between us. Isla's eyes widened. That will hurt you, possibly kill you. Established bonds do not break cleanly. I do not care. If I cannot have you, I will not spend the rest of my life feeling you out there, knowing you are alive and choosing not to be with me. I want it ended. Cade stepped forward. I have the means. Northern Alliance develops bond-severing compounds. I stole one before I left. It is painful, dangerous, but survivable. Do it. Drake's command was absolute. The ritual took place in the neutral ground, witnessed by both armies. Cade administered the compound, a mixture of wolfsbane and silver, and things Sera did not recognize. Both Drake and Isla collapsed, screaming as the bond between them ripped apart, tearing through their nervous systems like fire through dry wood. It lasted 10 minutes that felt like hours. When it ended, both lay gasping, blood leaking from their noses and ears, their bodies shaking with shock. But alive, changed, no longer connected. Drake stood slowly, and when he looked at Isla, his eyes held something new, not the desperate hunger of a bonded mate, just recognition of a person he had once known. I do not feel you anymore. His voice held wonder and grief tangled together. You are free. Isla's smile was sad. We both are. Drake turned to Garrett. I came for war, for revenge, for her. Now I have none of those things. What do I do with an army mobilized for a cause that no longer exists? You negotiate. Sera had recovered enough to speak, though her throat was bruised where Drake had crushed it. You take the trade agreements and defense alliance we offered. You rebuild your pack into something not centered on grief. You move forward. Drake studied her for a long moment. You risked everything for her freedom. Why? Because I am trying to build a world where women are not traded like livestock, where our choices matter, where we can say no and have it mean something. The Eastern Alpha looked at his warriors, at the casualties they had already taken, at the long siege ahead if he chose to continue. Then he looked at Isla, standing free and separate, no longer his in any way that mattered. I accept your terms. His decision was sudden. The war is over. We negotiate alliance. The treaties took 3 days to finalize. Trade routes opened, defense pacts signed, shared intelligence on Northern Alliance movements. A peace built not on forced bonds or territorial conquest, but on mutual benefit and grudging respect. On the final day, before Drake withdrew his forces, he sought out Sera privately. Thank you. His voice was quiet, for giving her the choice, for fighting to protect it, for showing me that love is not the same as possession. You loved her. Sera's observation was gentle. I did, but I loved the idea of her more than I loved her reality. He looked toward where Isla was preparing to return to Shadowmere. She deserves better than being someone's ghost. We all do. Drake left with his army, and Iron Peak celebrated a victory that had cost them dearly, but proven something important. That principles could win wars when backed by strategy and will. That night, Sera collapsed into bed beside Garrett, exhaustion pulling at her bones. He gathered her close, his hands gentle on her bruised throat. You almost died today. His voice was rough. Drake could have killed you. But he did not, because Isla saved you. Not because your plan was sound, it was reckless. It worked. She tilted her face up to kiss him. We won. We protected her freedom. We forged alliance. We proved that doing the right thing can have practical benefits. Garrett held her tighter. You are going to be the death of me, or the making of you. She smiled against his shoulder. One or the other. They fell asleep tangled together, the bond between them humming with connection and trust earned through fire. And in the corner of the room, Liana's ghost appeared one final time. The apparition looked at Sera, and this time her smile was genuine. Peaceful. You did what I could not. Stood up to them. Made them see us as more than tools. I had help. Sera's whisper was barely audible. Your journal. Your example. Your warning. I was wrong to doubt him. Liana's form began to fade. He would have chosen you, even over the pack. You changed him. Or he was always capable of it and just needed the right partner. The ghost's laugh was like wind through leaves. Maybe. Either way, you are stronger than I was, strong enough to survive him, to claim him back, to build the world I only dreamed of. Rest now. Sera's words were benediction. You have earned it. Liana faded into nothing, the cold presence that had haunted the stronghold finally releasing its hold. And Sera knew, with the certainty of the bond she shared with Garrett, that they had laid more than one ghost to rest. 6 months later, Sera stood in the great hall, visibly pregnant, addressing a pack that had stopped questioning her right to lead. Vera stood at her right hand, Cade, fully reinstated and elevated to senior warrior, at her left, and Garrett beside her, not ahead, not behind, but equal. A messenger had arrived seeking sanctuary. A young female Luna from a neighboring pack, fleeing an abusive bond, asking for protection and aid. The council debated whether to intervene, whether to risk conflict with another alpha, whether one woman's freedom was worth potential war. Sera listened to the arguments, then raised her hand for silence. We take her in. We protect her. We give her the choice to stay or go, to break her bond or attempt reconciliation, to build whatever life she chooses. And if her alpha comes demanding her return, we make it clear that forced bonds are not acceptable here. Not anymore. An elder protested, but tradition says, tradition changes. Sera's voice was firm. We changed it when we kept my daughter alive despite pack law against female alpha bloodlines. We will keep changing it until tradition serves wolves instead of oppressing them. She looked down at her swollen belly, where twins grew, one male and one female, both carrying the alpha gene that had historically been a death sentence for females. My daughter will grow up in a world where her strength is celebrated, not feared, where her choices matter, where being Luna is not about submission, but about partnership. We build that world now, together. The vote passed. The young Luna was granted sanctuary, and Sera felt the weight of what they were building, the foundation of change that would outlast all of them. That evening, she walked to the small memorial she had built for Eliza Thorne, the woman whose murder had started everything. She added a second stone beside the first, carved with Liana's name, honoring both women whose deaths and lives had shaped the path forward. Garrett found her there, his arms sliding around her from behind, his hands settling on her belly where their children moved. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Choosing this life. Choosing me. Choosing to fight battles that were not yours. Every day. She leaned back against him, and I would choose it again every time. Why? Because I was invisible for 22 years. Now I am unforgettable. I was powerless. Now I change laws. I was silent about murder. Now I speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. She turned in his arms to face him. You gave me the platform. I chose what to build on it. His kiss was gentle, reverent, full of love that had been earned through fire and choice, and the slow building of trust between two people who had both learned to survive by being harder than the world demanded. When they pulled apart, Sera looked up at the stronghold rising against the mountain, at the pack moving through their evening routines, at the world they were reshaping one choice at a time. She had been the overlooked daughter, invisible in her father's house of lies. She had witnessed murder and stayed silent. She had been sold like property to an alpha who had killed his last mate. But she had survived, had claimed her place through intelligence and courage and the stubborn refusal to accept that the world could not be better. She was Sera Stone, Luna of Iron Peak, mate to an alpha who had learned to share power, mother to children who would grow up knowing that strength and compassion were not opposites. She was unforgettable, and the world would remember what she had built here. The blood remembers, she had told herself in her father's study 8 years ago, kneeling at Eliza's grave. And it did. But blood could remember more than violence. It could remember courage, choice, the slow transformation of pain into purpose. Her children would inherit that memory, would carry forward the changes she and Garrett had fought to make real. And maybe, just maybe, they would build a world where no Luna would have to choose between survival and self, where partnership was not weakness, where being small did not mean being powerless. The sun set over Iron Peak, painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold, and Sera Stone stood in the light, her mate beside her, her children growing within her, her pack at her back. Invisible no more, unforgettable forever. The end.